Hello and welcome to Attacking Third. We are live on YouTube. We've got to do an NWSL recap of all things week 12 across the NWSL. We also have to chat and react to some breaking news affecting the U.S. women's national team. Not excited about that one, but we're going to go ahead and chat about it all for you. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Subscribe to us, like this video, and drop us your thoughts on all things women's soccer in the chat. You know, we want to hear from you. So let's go. Hey everyone, and welcome into Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. I'm joined today by special guest Lori Lindsey, former U.S. international. And on today's episode, we are going to recap NWSL Week 12. We had a lot of good soccer take place over the weekend. Some changes in the standings. We'll chat about that too. But we also have some breaking news to chat about. So a reminder to everyone to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you never miss out on a single episode. You get alerts for whenever we go live, and you can join us in the reaction and in the chat. And we're also a podcast. So go ahead, follow, like, and download us so that you never miss out on a single episode. Lori, thanks for being here. Lisa's still out. She's got married. She's enjoying the honeymoon, the wedding bliss, the newlywed bliss, and we've had Jordan Angeli with us do some episodes and fill in. And now you get to be here with me, so that I'm just not a single talking head in a camera talking about things and rambling about things. So thanks for being here. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Good to see you. And as I was saying, I must have been missing you. You were in some of my dreams not too long ago. So visiting me at night because I've been missing you. So yeah, thanks for having me. Great to see you. And yeah, lots to cover, right? It's been wild time.
Of course you're coming on and as a guest when it's just like a regular week, right? Nothing happened. No, but I love that you're coming through in June. You know, we're kicking off in the Pride celebrations, and we've been celebrating here on A3. And happy to have everyone join us this morning. If you're celebrating Juneteenth, we all should be celebrating Juneteenth. So I hope everyone is enjoying the day and educating themselves and taking some time. And if you're here, maybe that's part of it. Maybe you want to get filled in on some women's soccer stuff. And we're going to talk about all of that right now. We have to talk about some breaking news, unfortunately, that took place over the course of the weekend. And now is the opportunity as we come together to do the recap to finally get a chance to react to this stuff. And you know what, Lori? I think maybe we all needed the weekend to kind of just let it settle.
Yes.
Let it settle and let it kind of feel itself out. But the news is official. I believe it was late Thursday evening or Wednesday evening that the Athletic, Steph Young and Meg Linehan reporting that Becky Sauerbrunn was not going to be available for the World Cup. Later confirmation from Becky Sauerbrunn that yes, she in fact will not be available and miss out on this upcoming World Cup. She released a statement essentially confirming the breaking news, and it felt like it was a typical Becky Sauerbrunn statement. She started it off with how heartbroken she was, the sad news, but she kept it very honest and very real and said, like, that's sports for you and that's life, really. And of course, she went on to go ahead and close it out by trying to encourage her teammates, saying that she loved them, to take a minute to enjoy the moment, to appreciate everything that brought you here, every second of hard work and every bit of good luck, and to then get back out there and go win the whole effing thing. And yeah, it was, you know, you just read a statement like that, and it sort of makes it feel a little bit more real, right? You know, you get the initial reports, and of course it's good source reporting from credible journalists, and then you're like, oh no, and then you get the reaction from the player themselves, and then it just sort of all settles in. And there's been a lot of reaction to this, and I think that is the thing that has stuck out for me the most, Lori. I know as someone in the space, as media, it's like I also had to react to it. Wrote up response to Becky's absence. You can catch it on cbssports.com. But that was the thing that stood out for me, was just this sort of like collective reaction to this news, that we saw it from fans, general public. We're talking like casuals who will just probably tune in for the World Cup just because it's a massive event, you know, critics, media, everyone reacting to it in a way where it was just like this absolutely sucks, this blows. But having you on today as our guest, I wanted to just ask you, like, A, your first initial reaction to that, and B, like what's the significance of that for the locker room as a former player?
Yeah. Well, my initial reaction was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like, even though it's credible reporting, excellent, like as you mentioned, from Meg Linehan and Steph Yang, and then obviously Becky confirming it. It's just, yeah, it's devastating. And even though that Becky's saying it's part of sport, it's part of life, it doesn't make it any easier. And from a human aspect, right? Like all the work, this would have been Becky's fourth World Cup, and whether it's your first or your fourth, it's emotional time gearing up for it, and then to be taken away and doing all you can to get back and be ready, and having to say, okay, I can't be ready, I'm not going to be able to help my team. It doesn't make sense to take a spot if that's the case. And so, yeah, really just gutted and heartbroken for Becky. Becky and I were longtime training partners. Didn't cross over at UVA, a bit older, but we trained together when we both lived in DC. So longtime friends. And yeah, it's a bummer on all aspects. Really, it is devastating, because this is a player that leads the back line, is a true leader, and on the field wants to help others. I mean, you get that whole sense, right? I think that's what everybody feels, is even just a letter, you're just like, that's just true.
Yeah.
Right? And then also just one of those players that is wonderful. She wants the best for everybody. She's still the player that's like, if I make the team. What do you mean if you make the team? You're a captain. This doesn't even make any sense. So yeah, just from a whole collective, you feel that pain, but you also know that Becky's going to be the one in the background cheering the team on, sending messages, making sure that the team feels her presence, and all those words that she says would be completely true, right? Feels this team can win. And two things that have stood out, though, leading up to this is Becky, when they played Ireland afterwards and they had her on, and she was like, I want the team to be brave. Let's go win, right? Let's be excited about winning. And I think that's what the team has to take away. And then also, I think the words of Sam Ewis and Lynn Williams on Snacks, when
Yes.
like Becky is the players captain, like that. I hear that all the time in my head when I think about Becky, because that is so true from those two players that would know so well, right? And you're like, she's the moral compass and that's what you feel. And it's just like you lose that, and it's such a profound person that you're missing.
I think that's like the highest compliment I think you could give a teammate, your team captain, in that sense. I think it was like Sam Ewis some months back or some years back who actually first said that, like, Becky's like my moral compass. And you have sort of heard and seen like other teammates and players like adopt that as well, like hearing Lynn say that on their episode of Snacks as well, like as they reacted to it. It's just because it's just like I guess a perfect sentiment in terms of what to feel around for the loss of this player. But I think it's very interesting, as I think we can also note the senior national team program and how it's built and the type of machine it is, and the way players, please correct me if I'm wrong, or the way players have typically honored each other in the past is by sort of taking all of that, having their moments with it, and then trying to move on.
Yes, certainly.
Essentially, and I think we can already sort of see or feel that kind of coming out as well. I mean, I know sometime shortly, there will be a 23-player roster for that World Cup announced. And I think folks are already looking at that position and kind of honing in on the center back area about who's going to be there to kind of step up in those roles. And I mean, we're already hearing a lot about folks very excited about the possibility of Naomi Girma slotting not only into this role positionally, but possibly even having a leadership role somewhere down the line in the future, which is, I think, it's a lot to put on a young player who might be going to their first World Cup. But all your wheels start turning into those areas and start thinking about that. So I don't know. I just sort of feel like, yes, there's all those things that come with losing, such a big piece in your team captain, and maybe a bit of the morale in the locker room. But within the reporting as well, like sort of hearing how O'Hara might be in on this roster, and how maybe the plan is to sort of draw from other veteran players in terms of leadership. Folks were already asking, and they're like, "Oh, well, who's going to be the captain?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I'd love to see Crystal Dunn be given a shot. I think there's a lot of players in that locker room that could actually, be relied upon for all of that type of leadership. Maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe it's going to take a rotating cast of characters, right, to sort of try to lift everything up.
I agree. And I agree about the shot with Crystal Dunn. I think she deserves it. I fully expect, without managing minutes, her to be on the field for a great deal of this World Cup, right? Regardless of where. And yeah, I do think it's going to take a leadership, especially when you're bringing in some new faces. That's been reported as well as Savannah DeMello with her play in the league. If it is confirmed and announced, right? I mean, I believe she's going on that plane, so let's just state it as it is. But, new players. So you have to have, I think, a collective, especially with the way the women's game is growing. And these tournaments are tough, regardless if you think that there's some games that are winnable. It is about game to game, right? And so you need a collective group and the voice and some of the players that have been there to really kind of uplift that group and keep the focus on winning each game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. And we'll keep an eye on when the roster does eventually drop. Make sure you're all subscribed again, tune in, because we'll probably react to the roster when it does drop. But one piece we know for sure, unfortunately, Sauerbrunn will not be with the U.S. Women's National Team when they head off to Australia and New Zealand this summer. Let's try to pivot and recap some NWSL matches. We have some bangers to talk about. We have to start with this West Coast rivalry. I think this is the game that we need to kick off the recaps with, because it's really the game that kicked off and set this weekend in motion. San Diego Wave versus Angel City. Angel City, not a lot of travel in this one. It's just a SoCal rivalry, and maybe that benefited them because they went in to Snapdragon Stadium and took all 3 points, walking away with a dub, and did it in incredible fashion. 2-1 the scoreline, snapping San Diego's unbeaten streak in first loss in 7 games. You'll love to see it. That's what I was left with after watching this game, Lori. I was like, an 11th ranked team taking it to the top ranked team, first place at the time going into this week. I was like, I love it here, man.
Yeah, it wasn't even nighttime, and it was NWSL chaos. So.
Yes, exactly, 100%. Yeah, I mean, look, the Wave kind of setting things in motion here, right? I think what we got with that kind of narrow that 0-0 scoreline going into halftime. It was a big deal. I think that was beneficial. I think that benefits the opposition, right? You go in there, you keep things level. If you're the rival in this sense on the visiting side of things, you're motivated by that. You're like, all right, let's get back out there and take it to them. But we get San Diego getting on the scoreboard first a little bit early, right? In that kind of first 15-minute window of the second half, Kristen McNabb with an absolute rocket. Alex Morgan setting her up. It felt like maybe it was going to be the kind of goal that sucks a little bit of energy and life out of the other side. But that's not what happened in this one, because Angel City come on right back with a banger of their own, set piece, Paige Nielsen, and then M.A. Vignola closing it out. 2 minutes of regulation left. Assist from Scarlett Camberos. You'd love to see that for these two players. I feel like these are two players who've really been trying to build up with Angel City, and it's great to sort of see them kind of come together for that game winner for Angel City. But we talked a little bit on the preview, myself and Jordan, of this game, Lori, about some of the things that Angel City might be motivated by going into this game. Obviously, you have the rivalry. They're just 2 years in their existence, both of these clubs, but they're already building up and living up to some of the hype around it, right? So that they're motivated by that. But we also saw the recent departure of Freya Coombe. The club has moved on based on, unfortunately, poor results in the first half. And now Becky Tweed is interim head coach. And we felt, hey, that's going to be something that motivates the locker room as well. And I think we saw a little bit of that to kind of close out this second half for Angel City. Scenes. I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of look at it as, these types of things, when you have a coaching departure or change, it can go one of two ways. And typically it goes that where you see an uptick, at least for a few games, right? Until things kind of settle out and you either get a new coach or what, or you could continue on with the momentum. But that's certainly what you felt like, at least I did going into this game. You felt like, okay, this is a tough game for San Diego to face Angel City, their rivalry, just given the situation leading up to that week, because the players are going to be motivated. They're going to be motivated to play in San Diego if you're Angel City against your rivalry, who are number one at the top of the table. And you have a new coaching change, so you want to impress. But also, I would say for Angel City, there have been some good performances. They just haven't gotten the results. So you just felt like it was a matter of time. And 3 goals in this game by defenders, credit to them, because they were all great goals. But Vignola is one of those players who I felt like has really started to come in to her own this season. And I feel like in some ways, they had shifted between almost like a 3-back or hybrid. Julie Ertz comes in, provides a little bit of stability. That's when a player like Vignola, her skill set shines, because she can get forward, she can create the attack, she has caused problems whenever she's on the field. And to get the game winner, I think is such an important piece to how this Angel City wants to play and to attack. And I think that just proved it. And listen, this is a San Diego team that prides himself defensively. So to give up 2 goals at home and to do it against a rival, I mean, huge credit to Angel City. And I think those are the games that you're like, okay, we build off of, let's just, stay composed, but these are how you can build momentum going forward and start collecting points.
I'm just thinking of like this second half of the season, right? I think if you're one of those lower half table teams and even mid to lower half table teams, like this is it. Like the second half of your season is your reset button. And every single game from here on out cannot be like, let's build up to it. It's almost like you're going to have to come out with a sense of urgency in every single game.
Exactly.
And maybe that's not how you want to set yourself up, for a second half. But it is excellent. It's excellent to see that Angel City is kind of responding to all of that as well. I mean, they've been on a losing streak, or they haven't had a win in quite some time. Actually heading into that match themselves, and to sort of kind of turn things around. And I like all of what you're saying about Vignola, and I think it's important to kind of highlight those types of players for Angel City, because it sort of feels like those are the players that they're going to have to rely upon.
Yep.
As every team has talked about it at this point, the availability reports and players who have had to come back and return to play. But even as those players return to play, they still are building their minutes.
Yep.
So you're looking at these players who have kind of had to get a little bit of promotion from bench players to now regular starters and have them make an impact. And I think for Vignola, someone who's been there since year 1, I think you have a little bit of an opportunity there as someone who's been within the system and within the locker room to kind of have these kind of breakout games. And then for Camberos, who kind of has come in kind of early mid-season, I mean, you want to have a game where you're like, let me actually have the game where I'm on the stat sheet, have that contribution. So I think it's big. I think it's massive that the 2 of them were able to link up for that game winner. And hopefully it's one of ththose things that maybe this is the game that kind of catapults them, or is the catalyst to kind of keep this energy going. Because as you mentioned, like with a coaching dismissal, sometimes things can go either way, and it looks like they were motivated by that. But the other thing that can kind of happen sometimes is that shine can wear off. That kind of jolt, that energy jolt kind of wears off sometimes too. So hopefully they can, contain that, maintain it, and build on into the next weeks to come. Let's recap one more game before we take a break. I really want us to talk about North Carolina Courage and Orlando Pride, because we're talking about streaks. North Carolina has one of their own. They are looking so good heading into this second half. It's a 3-0 win for the Courage over Orlando Pride. I got to shout out the chat real quick, Lori. Barry is someone who's a North Carolina fan who's always in the chat rooting on this Courage, and he predicted this scoreline. It would be Courage 3-0. I was like, wow, look at this. Barry's going to love it when we go live. Let's chat all about it. Caroline with another massive game. I'm going to put myself on blast, Lori. And in the preview that I did with Jordan, I said, you know what? I love Caroline, man. She's going to be out there doing what she's doing, but I don't know. There you go, Barry. You predicted it. I was like, but I don't know if God was going to go out there and get another hat trick. And you know what? I wasn't wrong, but she definitely went out there and got some more goals. And I was like, oh my goodness, not only are the Courage looking dangerous, the Brazilians in this league are cranking up at the right time
goodness.
ahead of the World Cup. Let's talk about this match, Lori. What are your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, you're not talking North Carolina. You're exactly right. Without talking about Caroline, I mean, she's been phenomenal. And to your point, too, all the Brazilians, I think, really starting to come together at the right time and be crazy, wildly good, right at the World Cup. I'm excited to watch them. And the one thing that I've really enjoyed about this North Carolina team is in the years past, the best in transition. We knew about Jess McDonald, Lynn Williams, these players, unstoppable, and it was such a fun. Put teams under pressure, and then Sean Nahas and his staff having to, mix things up. A lot of departures and key personnel. Dabina being one of those players who really drove the attack in previous years, and so they had to reassess. And you saw a little bit of that last season. Almost felt like they were caught in two minds in terms of what that looked like and how they wanted to play. And this year, solely a much more possession-oriented team that lead the league in possession. And sometimes that doesn't tell the whole picture. I think, you can have a lot of possession. And that was one of the things. I was on their call versus Washington for the Challenge Cup midweek. And I think sometimes possession doesn't tell the entire story because, great, you can keep the ball. And if you're not creating chances, what does that look like? Or if Caroline's not on the field, then what does that look like? And I think now as they start to get some pieces back, Tess Bodie, who's been leading the line, Caroline obviously up top, and then just a rotation. But Narumi in the midfield with O'Sullivan seems to be a great balance. That takes off some of the load off of O'Sullivan. So now you're starting to see, in my opinion, what's a variety of ways that they can attack. Yes, you can affect the game with possession and then gaining territory, but you also have the ability to hit them on transition. So there's a variety of ways, and it makes it really difficult for them to stop. And I think you saw that with Orlando. Started the game strong, Orlando, first 10 minutes, and then clear game plan for North Carolina to how they wanted to attack, how they wanted to really monopolize this game, and they didn't look back. In Orlando, I'll say one real quick before I let you chime in. Yeah. I thought Orlando last week, that was going to be their statement game against Portland to kind of build off, as we were mentioning about Angel City. Can they now use this? But they're missing Marta. We talk about Brazilians. Marta's a huge piece right now for this kind of younger, getting going, a little bit of inexperience Orlando team. And when you miss a piece like that, somebody that can control the game, help slow things down, I think you, in some ways, become a little bit predictable, one-dimensional, and I think you saw that. And North Carolina was like, "Fine, here we go."
Yeah, I think, but credit to the Courage for kind of recognizing that and kind of capitalizing on that, right? I love that you mentioned Narumi in this one. Look, I was at that game in Chicago where they put up a 5-spot on the Red Stars, and there was just something about finally getting to see the Courage live and in person. At this point, they have shown us who they are, and I respect that so much. They are a team that want to have the ball, they want to retain that possession, be on it, and go ahead and create some exciting soccer when they do have it. And I think a big part of that in retaining all of that possession is making sure that you have the players who understand that assignment and who want to do that, and getting to watch Narumi, and that was such a big component for me in watching the Courage be able to kind of recycle the ball and keep the ball in various moments. And I think right now the timing of everything, the phases of seasons, and how we're watching Caroline kind of hitting this kind of like a little bit of a heat check right now. It's a little bit of a hot streak for her, and I like it. I think the time that everything's kind of coming together in a very good time for the Courage. And I think even at the end of this game, you sort of see it, like she just kind of has this like relentless kind of engine, and they were like, that's enough, come on out, like you're rest, like they sub her out because it's just kind of like, all right, like you enough here. You created this chaos on a goal. They end up crediting it as an own goal to McCutcheon, but you just see this player and all of that chaos that she creates inside of the box or out wide, and it just sort of feels, it's hard to believe that that I had where I'm like, oh, it's coming together, as if it's not been coming together for weeks, right? But it just sort of feels the timing of everything, with even some of these kind of standout individual performances as well, sort of feel like they're kind of peaking at the right time a bit. So absolutely congrats in order for the Courage. They're kind of keeping their momentum going, and hopefully maybe this is that first test for Orlando. Maybe they're like, okay, we could see what it's going to look and feel like when we don't have Martha. Maybe we have to make some adjustments here.
Yep.
So I'm very curious to see how Orlando respond to this loss from the Courage. But we have more games to recap, and we're going to do that. So stick with us after a quick break.
And how about this?
Get ready for non-stop action that will have you saying,
You gotta be kidding!
"Oh my, Canada."
What a play and what a finish!
That's some pretty good football, eh?
He's gone all the way to the house!
It's the Canadian Football League, Friday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, let's keep recapping some games here. Catch everybody up on what you missed across Week 12 in NWSL. We got to talk about a draw, a 0-0 draw, specifically between Houston Dash versus OL Reign. Lori, I'm going to let you know, on the preview, I didn't feel great about making a pick or even previewing this game because I was so nervous about the heat effect. Talking about a heat check for Caroline. Let's bring it into this game, but for literal heat check of the weather, I was nervous. I was nervous about it, even though it was, you have games kicking off and what's, considered an early evening kickoff. It's tough. It's a tough scenario. I think something that Jordan and I felt like we were speaking about over the last couple of weeks or so when it comes to Houston specifically is the challenges that they have faced in kind of turning their stadium into a place where it's like, this is our home field. Let's make this a tough place for everyone to play in. And they get a little, there's like almost like they get a little bit of help in that there's this tough games where they have they have to battle against heat as well. But it's almost like it also takes a lot of energy from the home side as well. And so wasn't too sure if there was going to be enough in the tank on either side here to really come out and steal a win. And if it happened, that it would kind of be maybe like an exhaustive kind of oops type of goal. But that ultimately didn't happen in this game. It ends scoreless between the two of them. You see players exhausted at the end of this game. I don't know, Lori, is this kind of game where it's like, if you're both teams and you kind of have to play in those conditions, are you just like, okay, we split the points, we're moving on?
Totally. I remember as a player, that was the toughest place to play. The travel, because it was just a bit further, obviously, when you're going completely to the West Coast from the East Coast, depending on where you're playing, then it's going to be a long trip. But then it was like going to Houston, it was just like this a little bit further. That was just kind of annoying because it's a little bit longer than you really want it to be. And then, as a player, that was the toughest place to play because you would be, myself as a major sweater, I would be completely drenched and dehydrated before the game would even start. So then you're already down. And even though the sun might not be out, it is still so humid. So I think, to what you were saying with you and Jordan, I think there's still ways to find for Houston how they make that like their fortress, because we saw a glimpse of that last year in the quarterfinals when they played Kansas City. Kansas City ended up winning in the last second, but that place was packed and the energy that they felt. So the fans are there. It's just about showing up because that's what pushes your team on. And I like this Houston team. And you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they have the fewest goals conceded. So in the league now.
After this week especially, I think.
And so this is a team that they've done really well defensively. And I think they're creating chances. I felt like last week they were unfortunate not to get the win versus Gotham. But it's a tough place to play. I think they need to collect points more than they are there, given that they are used to the heat, especially against an OL Reign team. Because I think if you're OL Reign, regardless if there's a red card and you go up a player, right, or you're up a player throughout a lot of that game, you're still like a point on the road at Houston. That's like 3 points. Get us out of here because they're not going to be used to that heat.
I'm with you. I love the antidote, dude. You're like, as a major sweater, it was tough for you to play there. No, I listen. I think we're talking about timing and phases of things for teams. I think at this point, you've got Houston just kind of like taking their like they know it's coming. Like we've heard from the players themselves. Like I think it was Jane Campbell not too long ago in a post-game conference. I said, you know what, we're getting it together. We don't want to peak at the wrong time. We're staying in it. And they're just on the outside looking in, right? They've been kind of hovering in seventh place. And I think this team going on a bit of an unbeaten streak of their own. They've got 2 wins, 2 draws. I think they're going to give us something to keep watching for towards the final stretch of this season. I think this game, maybe folks aren't looking at this type of match from Houston as like a statement game, but I think I might be, because I think they lose Natalie Jacobs on a red card.
Yeah.
Right. And we're talking like you have to manage a game. You have to manage a game now with 10 players in these ridiculous conditions. And to just sort of see how they were able to not just withstand those conditions, but kind of just put out this really gutsy type of performance against an all-rain side that, I next to Portland, I've lauded on this show as like having the deeper benches. So I have 2 teams with incredible depth, and I think it's Portland and I think it's the Rain. And I think when you go down a player in a match like this, again, it's against a team that has the depth, it can be nervy. You can maybe sort of, lose your focus, lose your mentals a little bit. And we didn't see that from the Dash side. So I thought it was an incredibly gutsy performance from them. And so maybe folks aren't looking, like maybe they look at the scoreline and they're like, whatever. Like that's not a statement game at all. But I think if you're really watching this game, some of the factors that came into play, for me, I'm looking at it as a little bit of a statement game as well. You got to watch out for the Houston Dash team, because as it sort of feels like they're kind of figuring things out in the attacking sense, where now they've got Sanchez, they've got Ordonez, Alozier is alongside and fitting in absolutely well with these attackers in the front line. The fact that they could pull off a match like this, I think, says a lot about the team.
Yeah, I like that perspective a lot. I agree with that. I think that's a great perspective because, I was kind of looking at it as an OL Rain. It's going to be difficult to travel. Yeah. They get the point. But going down, I agree completely. And you just feel like they are on the brink of, finding kind of that rhythm in the attack. Lozia, who you mentioned, lights out. Okay, Nigeria, here we go.
Yep. We're also, I know we're tuned into that too. It's so close to World Cup that we can't help but look at these performances from players who are likely going to be missing for the World Cup, and she's absolutely one of those players. Yeah. But yeah, a little bit of a tiny, maybe not a full statement, but it's a game that absolutely says something to me from the Dash. But speaking of statement games, one that I was looking for, let's talk about Racing Louisville versus Gotham FC, and I'm very excited to hear your insights on this because I heard you on the call for this one, but in the preview to let you know what I was looking for, Lori.
Yeah.
Look, this Racing Louisville team, they're good and they're fun. And I like watching them play soccer. But in the regular season, I'm like, they've shown that they can hang with what's considered, top upper half table teams and top talented teams, playoff kind of caliber teams, contender type teams. Mm-hmm. They've shown that they can hang, but I was looking for them to finally get a win against one of these teams. Mm-hmm. They've gotten results against bottom half table teams. They're dominating a Central Region Challenge Cup division against other teams who are mostly struggling this season. We're complimenting Houston Dash, but you're talking current
or rotating players, right?
And Chicago, and rotating players. So I'm like, okay, they're getting wins against these types of teams. I want to see it against a top table team, and they win. They did it against Gotham, and I picked them to do it, and I'm happy to say that they came through with it. Lori, what'd you see on the call? What'd you think of this game? 2-0 Racing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really high on Gotham. I've liked what they did on the offseason. So coming into this game, I'm still high on them. I think they're really kind of sorting things out in the attack. Kind of what are the pieces for them, right? In terms of like, they can go quick, Gotham, but you also know that they want to keep possession. So I think they're still sorting that out. And I say that about Gotham because even though I've been high on them, I felt like, this is a tough time to, one, almost like Houston, travel to Louisville. It's not easy to get there. And also face this Racing Louisville team, because I think early on, part of the struggle for them was, one, collectively getting everybody back. They had some injuries, so they lacked a little bit of depth compared to other teams, forcing some shifting of players. And then in the last, this would have been the 8th game if Leicester would have played in all competitions, that they've gone with the same back four and London goal. So I'm like, okay, they're building consistency here. Now, what does that look like consistently in the attack? Because they need to put all these pieces together. And I just felt like coming into this game, well, we're going to see a really strong Racing Louisville side. And also it was interesting because Jen Hildreth, who's on the call with me, the day before, we got to go see Kim Bjorkegren at his office. We got to see the training facility behind the scenes. They have a fantastic setup. It's a lot like Kansas City. They do share it with Louisville City. However, it's just completely mirrored on both sides. So they're also completely separate. But the facilities, everything, you just got this like really kind of family-oriented a facility and just the club in general. So that was interesting to see behind the scenes. And I'm like, here we go. DeMello, who we know is going on that plane, let's just put it out there. She's going to have like a different sort of emotion with this game. That Lana, my goodness, what a game. The lights out. On the other side, you have Wong Chuang, who gives you something different. So all of these pieces, and all that to say is why I started with Gotham, is because we've talked a lot about what they've done in the offseason, but I don't think we've given enough credit what Racing Louisville had done in terms of bringing Carson Pickett, bringing Urseg to just balance out some of their youth, because they were so young last year and inexperienced. Then you bring in internationals that are continuing to build and just perform on another level. And you also have the rising stars of Howell, Borges, who's great. So I think they have incredible balance to this roster that we probably haven't given enough credit to. And this feels like another one of those statements where you're like, midweek, they created a lot of chances, which they've been really wanting to work on. Scored 3 goals against Houston, who had heavily rotated. So I want to make sure that is known in a Challenge Cup game. But something for Racing Louisville to build off of. And I think you saw that. They were in a rhythm. Gotham weren't, and made it difficult, really difficult from the first whistle.
Yeah, I think, something that also came out of the reporting, you touched on it out of The Athletic when they reported that Sauerbrunn would not be available for the World Cup. These additional tidbits that, other players who are going to be named to that roster when it eventually does drop. And one of those players that got name dropped was Savannah DeMello. And I think watching this player's evolution, not from year one, right, as a rookie, into year 2, we've seen zero signs of a sophomore slump. If anything, we have witnessed her elevating her game we've witnessed her elevating her game in this sophomore season of hers. And I think a part of that, though, is I like that you mentioned Borges in that sense. I like that you mentioned some of these other internationals that are around the team and on the pitch, is having those extra outlets, right? And you're able to focus on those strengths of your game within a 90-minute match, because you've got the teammates to build with and off of. And just sort of watching her performances over the course of this first half of the regular season in this most recent game against Gotham, and the reports that she's going to the World Cup, I'm very excited to see what this player could do in a World Cup with players who are used to playing in these kind of high environment, high stakes type of games. So I love this for Racing. I love that this was a game that they got in light of the news that has sort of dropped already around them. But I am curious. That's probably going to be a really big piece to go missing for a long stretch of time in your season. So I'm curious to see the response and what the adjustments are going to be in light of what may be her eventual absence here.
Yeah, I agree, because she's such a huge piece. And so it is about then other players stepping up. And that's kind of the beauty, right, at this point in time, is that with how this league works is when you miss players, who can step up, who can make a statement for themselves and really start to compete for those positions in a way that maybe they wouldn't if a Savannah DeMello hadn't gone on that plane or hadn't gone to the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 2 more games to talk about, Lori. So let's pause, take a break, and close it out. Stick with us.
They say patience is a virtue. But for some things, we can't wait.
All right, let's wrap it up with our last 2 games to recap. Let's start with Chicago Red Stars versus Portland Thorns. The Thorns going on the road, picking up all 3 points. A 3-2 scoreline in this one. Lori, I like the response from Chicago. It's a loss. It's another loss for this team, unfortunately. They've been struggling this year. It has been let's just call it what it is. It's been a historically tough season for that franchise, but coming off of a 5-0 loss in their last regular season match against the Courage, a 4-0 loss against the Courage in the Challenge Cup game midweek, and then to have to turn it back around and go back home and go up against Portland Thorns, a team that has not been dropped out of the upper half of the table, a team that we both agree has a lot of depth on that squad, that even if they go on the road, they can have their rotations. And Chicago just not, advantageous in those areas. But to sort of see this response kind of have a little bit of a fight, it's a positive sign. But for Portland, maybe there's some other things here. And I talked about this on the preview, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. Something that I think they've shown us is that they're an exciting attacking team. But at this point in the season, we got to say something's afoot with the defensive shape of this team, because they, at this point in the season, are no strangers to conceding goals.
Yeah.
And we see this happen. It gets a little nervy at moments in this game for Portland. My goodness, there's a moment where there's a potential opportunity for Chicago to equalize, and it goes off the post. So they're saved essentially by this post and a shot by St. George's. So is it one of these things where you kind of wipe your brow and you say, all right, we got out of there, let's keep it moving and just move on to the next one, because it keeps them still in the upper half, and Chicago keeps them still in the lower half of the table.
Yeah. Well, I do think that you're like, okay, we got the 3 points and we're out of there. Right. Yeah. And probably too close for comfort for Portland, but I agree with you. I think that they have shown that they're one of the best attacking teams, if not the best attacking fluid team, with all the pieces that they have getting into the attack in this league. However, I think, one of the things that even Mike Norris has said throughout this season is we're susceptible in defensive transition. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with one, Becky Sauerbrunn has missed some pieces. She's a calming factor back there. You're going to have leadership, the understanding positionally. It's not that they haven't had her out previous seasons before and had to fill those gaps. But I think anytime you're missing somebody of that stature, and as we mentioned at the top of this show, that is a loss, right? That is a significant loss, especially with the way that Portland wants to play, which is aggressive in their approach. I also think, I've been high on Sam Coffey since she stepped foot in this league. Yeah. But at times when you are only playing with that one pivot, if you're smart and you get players on either side of her, she can be dragged out of position, and rightfully so, because she's trying to cover, right? So that makes sense. But then you have to make sure that you're diligent with allowing for other players to drop back in, help cover for her, or the positioning specifically on that back line has to be spot on. And I think that sometimes that's when they get themselves in trouble. And it's not that they aren't aware of that. I just think with the fine margins and how tight this league is, even if a team like Chicago, and to your point, yes, massive credit, because you could show up to every game being like, what are we doing here? Right. And I feel like they keep showing up with smiles on their face. It's tough. And they're like, they fought back. Like they conceded at a time when you don't want to concede late in the first half, and you're still coming out, you're getting a goal, and they're cheering. Like these are like, oh, like go for this. They're professional athletes and they're competitive. I wouldn't expect anything different, but like also as a competitive athlete, you're like, this is not it, right? Like we're pissed, and they freaking show up. And I credit to those players because they keep going. But I think it's something for Portland to look at. And I also think is whatever you can do. If you're scoring goals at any point in time, even though it's a loss for Chicago, my goodness, credit to those players because they keep showing up.
Yeah, right. It's a long season, and they're just taking it game by game. And I think at this point, it's all you can really do. There's a lot of we've talked about it endlessly. I think on this show, there's a lot of just uncontrollables there for them, and they're doing what they can, which is show up and show out. And I think this was one of those games where they can maybe take a look at and say, okay, we're putting some things together here, like the pairing of Davidson and Sharples together. I think the return of Sharples is going to help provide some relief there a little bit in the back for the Chicago Red Stars team. I know there's going to be concerns as Aaron Wright exited the game with an injury. So hopefully it's nothing too major for this team, because that would be a blow. Let's not act like it wouldn't be for the team at this point. But I think if you're Portland, I'm with you. They're just like, okay, we're just going to score more goals than the other team. And look, there's nothing wrong with kind of having that energy throughout the remainder of your regular season. So kudos to them on hanging on and getting all 3 points. But we have to talk about one final game and a team that could not hang on We got to talk about KC Current versus Washington Spirit. Current get the loss in this one after going up. It ends 3-2 in favor of Washington Spirit. Lori, what happened in this one?
Oh, I don't even know. I'm not even sure that the Current know. I was actually, and just from a Kansas City standpoint, because I really enjoy this Washington Spirit team. I think one thing about Mark Parsons that has been true through and through since he stepped foot in this league, dating back to his first time with Washington, is that he knows how to win. And he's going to galvanize his team, right? And there's been endless talk about Mickey Owen playing on the back line. Well, we can all be quiet because how well has she done? And then she scores goals when on set pieces or when it's needed. Mateer in the midfield, right? Like they're playing a diamond that's difficult to play against. They're exciting. Obviously, anytime you have X factors like Trinity Rodman, Hatch, and Ashley Sanchez coming out of the midfield there, then you're always going to be a handful. But for Kansas City, my God, look at this roster. And there has been too many, in my opinion, ups and downs, ebbs and flows in this season. And they'll agree. Like, this isn't like anything new for them. They're the ones out there. But I thought, okay, here we go, turning some things around, getting a bit more stability. Dabinia getting Michelle Cooper. Love her. So many of her games at Duke. And this player, even though she hasn't found the back of the net a ton, a bright future. So to set an NWSL record, I should say, with the earliest goal.
It's like, of course, right?
Yeah.
But look, this is a player that they were high on. They went out, made moves to try to move higher in the draft, to grab and obtain this player and try to build with them, and had to start week 1 in the regular season. So I've been high on this player. She doesn't have the goals, like you said, at this point to maybe kind of keep her names in the lights in the race for a Rookie of the Year campaign, but to kind of finally get that first goal and by like shattering and establishing a new record for fast goals, like that makes sense.
Yeah.
That almost feels correct for Michelle Cooper. But I mean, it was a way to put the motion and set the game in motion for Kansas City. I was just kind of like, okay, maybe this is it. Like we talked about timing of a season. If you're one of those lower half table teams coming out with the urgency and sticking with it and making sure you're going out there and getting those wins, right? Not just result at this point. You got to get 3 points. And it just sort of felt like they were going to carry that energy. They're getting the players back that they wanted in the course of the offseason. Dabinia has been doing well with this team. DiBernardo has been performing well with this team. Now they're getting Morgan Gautreau back, who I think is going to be an absolute key to unlock some things.
Agree.
Kansas City Current moving forward. We almost saw it come together in this game, but like you said, there was just something about this Spirit side as they're being coached under Mark Parsons, a coach who's not unfamiliar with making sure that teams have the variables to go out there and turn things around. And this is a Spirit side that's only 2 years removed from a championship of their own. They've got players who know what it takes or means to turn things around. But to see the younger players, the newer players to this Washington Spirit side make that impact and ensure that game gets switched on, I think is very, very telling for this Washington Spirit side and the depth that they have. So yeah, we absolutely have to shout out Paige Mateer. I think if we're talking about these first year players, kind of, I think, following under the radar a little bit in terms of players who can maybe make a run for that Rookie of the Year record, doing some incredible things with the Spirit.
What a great profile too. I mean, it's also like it's so unassuming because you wouldn't expect it, and then can cover ground. I mean, that's a player that goes hidden and like is not flashy, right? When you go to games, you're not going to like point to Paige Mateer, but that's a player that helps win you championships because they'll do so much of the dirty work. They do all of these things that like win the ball back, building in the air, and to be doing it as a rookie, I think it's taken off a lot of the load of Andy Sullivan in there, and then it allows players like the front three that we just mentioned to be able to have a bit more freedom and to get into influence the final third. Really, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, love to see it. And of course, the 3 points propels the Spirit back on top of the standing. So congratulations to them. Welcome back. They are number 1 heading into week 13 in NWSL action with 23 points. That's a wrap, though. We recapped all the games on Attacking Third. Thanks, Lori, for joining me today. Appreciate you being here and talking all things NWSL. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today on Attacking Third. Go ahead and download, follow, listen, and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Watch us on YouTube at youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back with more this week on all things women's soccer. So stay tuned. For Sandra Herrera and Lori Lindsey, this was Attacking Third.